Behind the Scene with David Badin. Why the passion for Israel court reform? January 19th, 2023. You have to go back to June 1992. With the defeat of the Likud government and the ascension of the Labour Party, the Palestine Liberation Organization, an outlawed terror group in full state of war with Israel, raised its profile and initiated illegal contacts with the Israel Labour Party. Full disclosure, I worked at the time as the Jerusalem correspondent for CNN Radio with full access to high-level contacts with the U.S. and Israeli governments. Was therefore in a position to confirm that the Bush administration, followed by the Clinton administration, laid out clear policy directives which mandated that Israel must follow up on these PLO feelers, which the U.S. government described as a PLO peace initiative. In August 1993, Israel Foreign Minister Shimon Peres was summoned to Washington to coordinate a shift in Israel policy, which suddenly recognized the PLO as a peace partner, despite continuing PLO terror attacks. That policy engendered the Oslo process and an accord which was signed on the White House lawn on September 13th, 1993, yet never ratified by the PLO to this day. Sources in the Israel security establishment and the Likud opposition in the Knesset raised objections to the new U.S. pressure on Israel to recognize the PLO as a peace partner. In the words of Benny Begin, a member of Knesset at the time, the son of Menachem Begin, he said, well, what the PLO wants is a two-stage solution, not a two-state solution. As far as the U.S. demanding that Israel recognize the PLO feelers as a peace process, legal objections were raised. However, this was exactly the time that a new head of the Israel Supreme Court, Aaron Barak, emerged and assumed power. From 1992 until this very day, the Israel Supreme Court established a precedent to throw out all legal objections to what became known as the Oslo peace process. The Barak court would not object to the September 13th Accords, even though these accords were never ratified by the PLO, and even though the PLO never denounced its public incitement to violence, nor did the PLO ever cancel its charter to destroy Israel. Even worse, the Barak court would not object to the September 15th, 1993 policy statement by the Israel government that the IDF would supply arms to the Palestine Liberation Organization, known and under the Palestine Security Forces, which were supposed to be cooperating with Israel. The Barak court would not interfere with decisions of the Israeli government to free masses of felons who were identified with the PLO, even though they had been convicted of murder or attempted murder. Over the past 30 years, families of loved ones who have been murdered by the PLO felons filed tens of appeals to the Israel High Court of Justice to file motions against the new freedom afforded to PLO convicted felons. Now, what's very important to point out is that at no point did the Israeli government or the courts of law apply any system of recidivism verification to determine if these felons were likely to repeat their capital crimes in Israel. The retired commander of Israel security forces in Jerusalem confirmed that Israel freed at least 9,000 first-degree felons without any regards to the possibility of recidivism, and that continues to this day. Now, let's address the issue of the removal of civil liberties, property rights from Jews in any area acquired by Israel in the 1967 war. A central feature of the U.S. Middle East policy in 1992, which was adopted by the Israeli government and approved by the Israel's courts, concerned a policy of delegitimating the civil rights and property rights of Jews who live in Judea, Samaria, Katif, and Jerusalem. For 30 years, the Israel High Court has tossed out cases where Jews in Judea, Samaria, and Jerusalem, and I mentioned before also the Katif, sued for their civil liberties and property rights. The most egregious decisions of the Barak court were concerned the court's stand towards Jews expelled from their homes in Katif and in Samaria in 2005. The harsh reality that the Israel government was simply not prepared to provide for the 1,700 families evicted from their homes in the 21 Jewish communities of Gush Katif. What is more important and I say, vital, is the court's insensitivity to the humanitarian needs of the displaced residents, which was basically non-existent. Now, on the eve of the Qatif expulsions on August 23rd, 2005, Israel Legal Forum attorney Dr. Yitzhak Maron provided sobering evidence for the failures of the court and the government in this regard. Dr. Maron was a senior member of the Israel Legal Forum, an organization of 50 lawyers that worked pro bono during the period leading up to the expulsion in an effort to ameliorate the difficulties of Gush Katif residents, presenting their case to the Knesset, the government, and the courts. The Israel government approach to the settlers, said Dr. Maron, was aggressive from the beginning with a total lack of direct communication. The prime minister never went to look in their eyes, and no minister in the government who voted for the expulsions did so without ever visiting the communities whose fates they were discussing. Indeed, when Defense Minister Mofaz traveled to Qatif to meet with residents on April 19th, 2005, I was witness to the fact that he would not answer any questions. 3 days before the expulsions in Gush Katif and the Shomron were about to begin, the government announced that 1,000 rooms had been rented and everyone had a place to go. The reality was that 2,500 rooms were required because of large families. Officials had to scour Israel seeking rooms at the last moment. The Israel Forum insisted in this emergency plan. People left their homes literally not knowing where they were going to wind up. With all the problems regarding provision of space came other issues. No social work professionals were sent by the government to help people cope logistically. And psychologists were not sent to help people with the traumas they went through. As the government ordered thousands of people to remove their homes, it was obligated to provide satisfactory alternative housing. That took 10 to 15 years without any objection from the courts. Full disclosure once again, I was present at the Israel Court of Justice when the Chief Justice Aaron Barak rejected the final appeal before the Gush Katif expulsions. Dr. Meron, speaking on behalf of the Katif community about to be expelled, appealed to Justice Barak to consider the justice of their case. These settlers were resigned to the fact that they would be expelled and only asked at the end for a relocation process to be implemented. When I saw Justice Barak do what I saw him do and say it was something that I would never forget. Justice Barak looked at the government lawyer and asked if the government had a plan to implement systematic resettlement of 21 Qatif communities, even though the Israel government witnesses informed the courts that no such plans existed. When the Israel government lawyers gave a generalized response that the government would take care of everything, Justice Barak smiled and thanked them for a response and gave an order for the bulldozers to begin their demolitions. The smile on Justice Barak's face turned into a smirk. Years of suffering endured by those who were expelled from Gush Katif could have been avoided. Deja vu. When the U.S. announced its policy to demand the removal of Jews from Judea, Samaria, and even the old city of Jerusalem, a delegation of U.S. citizens who lived in these communities approached the U.S. consul in Jerusalem, Mr. Philip Wilcox, about the human rights of Jews in these communities. Wilcox responded immediately with one sentence that echoed around the world: "If you live there, you have no human rights." There was silence in the room. Wilcox then asked participants if they would like coffee or tea. The legacy of Philip Wilcox lives on today, who heading the Foundation for Middle East Peace, which finances 40 organizations that support the PLO's cause and advocate the continuing expulsions of Jews from their homes in Israel. This is David Bedin reporting, Behind the Scene with David Bedin. Thank you.